And you have 1 minute.
So, thank you, Andy. It's good to see you here tonight, and thank you for courageously sharing your story. And the answer to your question is a simple yes. I heard the term just recently, I have to admit it, for the first time. I heard the term right to rest. And I was thinking about that today as I was at home, safe and comfortable, making soup with vegetables from my own garden. And I was thinking about the right to rest as I was working. So thank you for being here.
Candidate Cypress.
Thanks, Andy, for sharing your story. The answer is yes and yes. And just to share a story of my own, I have a brother-in-law who for many years has experienced chronic homelessness, struggles with mental health issues, lives in Florida, does day labor work, and I've been on the council the last couple of years, and whenever issues related to homelessness come up, that's who I think about. And I think it's important for all of us to share our stories, because I know there are many of these stories, and the more we share them, the more we realize that, this is something that affects all of us. So yes, absolutely.
Candidate Kennedy.
Thank you. Thanks, Andy, for sharing your story. It's very powerful. I have a few family members who suffer with mental health, and I know the importance of, if it was my family member, I would want them treated in a fair way. And so, for me, it's a yes. I value everyone, and that we need to make sure that we're taking care of folks when they're having issues of mental health or any other issue that comes about. So, really important, especially if it's the right to rest. I served as an AmeriCorps member and spent a day in the life of, and it was really, really impactful on what happens to people who are homeless and what they have to go through just to make it through the day, to go somewhere to spend the night if they have that available for them. So definitely I would. And thank you for sharing.
Candidate Booth.
Thank you, Andy, for your speaking tonight. Yes and yes. And my question is, how does this actually support or assist the homeless? I talked with the Human Rights Office, and this is the same question that the Human Rights Commission is trying to answer in Duluth. I think as a city council, we'd have to have more discussion with Human Rights Commission to have concrete ideas on how to ensure the rights of the homeless and that they're being upheld and not violated. And just an addendum to that, my wife is the director of a mental health facility here in Duluth, and I have firsthand knowledge of a lot of homeless people that are basically kicked out of a hospital setting and have no place to go. And I really empathize with your case, and thank you very much.
Candidate Osbakken.
Thank you, Andy. I have been homeless with my 2 sons when they were little, and fortunately I owned a van, so we were able to sleep out of the elements. Yes and yes to these questions, but I don't know if, they certainly don't go far enough. Thunder Bay just adopted I believe it's Homeless First, may have that name a little wrong, but 10 days, people come. In 10 days, Thunder Bay must find them a place. And that's what we need to do. We can't have people outside. And these things, the right to rest, privacy and freedom, that's draconian to think that we might have regulations interfering with those rights.
Candidate Hobbs.
Thanks for sharing your story. And yes, we have to work with the Human Rights Commission to ensure that homeless are a protected class and have all the same rights. It shouldn't be criminal to be homeless. What should be criminal is the fact that we have inaction and indifference towards poor people and stigmatize them in a manner that doesn't treat them as equals. And so I support that, and also the right to rest as well.
Candidate Hansen.
Thank you, Andy. What you said, I think that how we treat our most vulnerable is really telling of our ability to test ourselves in our own humanity. And I feel very excited about where the community is going. Yes, I would commit to this. I do commit to it, and I feel like this is one way as a city council we have the ability to be proactive and purposeful in how to make policy that we can, like others have said, hold people accountable with. Right now we don't have the way to do that, so thank you.
Candidate Westerlin?
Andy, thanks for sharing your story. I really appreciate hearing it. And I just wanted to note, I think it's really telling that you introduced yourself as a father before talking about the fact that you had experienced homelessness. And I think that's a fact that gets glossed over when people talk about the collective homeless. These are people with families and lives and aspirations. And so, of course, yes, we need to include the rights of people who are experiencing homelessness in a protected class. And homelessness, as many of you I'm sure know, is not a static identity, or you're not a homeless. You're a person who's experiencing homelessness, and you need to be treated with respect, given opportunities to find stable housing and support in doing so. And so this is one way that government, I think, can really effectively try to assist folks who are going through that. So yes, absolutely. And yes, the second part of the question about the audit, I think that's a really great opportunity to hear more stories of things that are actually happening on the street. And to effectively address those, and to work with our partners in law enforcement to ensure that they can be good advocates for folks who are experiencing homelessness and address it with humanity and dignity and respect.
Thank you, Candidate Westerlin. And last but not least, Candidate Larson.
Thank you. Is this on? Great, okay. Andy, thank you for sharing your story. It's really nice to meet you tonight. Thank you for speaking openly about your experience. Yes and yes. I do believe firmly that as a community, we are only as strong as our entire community, which means when we have people who are vulnerable, people who are unsafe, people who don't feel that they belong, that affects everybody. And so certainly as a city councilor, I have been very supportive of creative solutions, housing solutions. Many people here know that I spent 12 years working at CHUM. And so I'm very familiar with some of what you're talking about, and very passionate about creating opportunity where we can and bringing people into the life of our community. And also I want to say that if you're having an experience with the police or are having issues, please call, because I have worked in the past with our police and with Deb Holman at CHUM to ensure that people are safe. And lastly, I do want to say that I have very, very high expectations for the Duluth Human Rights Office and our commission.
All right, thank you, Candidate
Thank you.
Larson.
Yeah.
All right, our next storyteller is Salam, and he's going to be addressing another housing issue. Gee, my apologies. This is my fault for not being here early. Me too.
Okay. I'm Salam, everybody. Hi. I'm currently serving as an AmeriCorps IPN volunteer coordinator in the school district. And right now my passion is as a community and empowering people to know their worth, as well as demonstrating there is hope for the future. I am a single mother. However, that doesn't define who I am as a person. It just gives me a purpose to provide self-sufficiency, to ensure that my children, as well as youth in the community, dream big and look for a brighter future in their generation, because they are our future. I'm not here to tell you my whole life story, but to let you know about housing and how it is impacting people citywide, not just people living in lower incomes. What is factual is the numbers from the issue groups. It is clear that there's evidence and that the life expectancy is much shorter in the Hillside and the Lincoln Park areas. Housing should be extended beyond where we emphasize affordable housing, expand where we develop more affordable housing, developments by utilizing existing resources within the city and partnering agencies. We can begin to increase life expectancy rates in all neighborhoods, even impact criminal patterns. This is not only makes it unsafe for our children, who are our future, but it is also decreasing the value in this town by not expanding to all areas of Duluth like Woodland, Skyline, and Park Point. So people with lower incomes, they live the reality by having to be subjected and limited to subsidized, substandard housing, are living in neighborhoods not of their choice. I am grateful, of course, to not have to live on the streets, but I am not a number. I am a human and should have some choice of at least what neighborhood I live in. My reality sets in every day when my two small children walk into our apartment and are exposed to people that aren't living healthy lifestyles, seeing a drunk man or someone under some other type of drug influence, substance. My reality also sets in when my house has paint chips and my kids are exposed to lead poisoning, and it's much common in lower incomes. Because of this, I had to have my son tested for lead poisoning, and even though his test came back okay, it was still horrible to put him through. Right now, I live on a very busy street and there is no yard. This leaves me experiencing high levels of anxiety just walking out of my door. The reality of not having a choice in where to live is that people like myself and my family are being held back from the very thing I'm passionate about, and that's living each day to ensure a brighter future. This makes it more clear for why planning for the future is so hard for others when there are so many unknowns. And the reality is that they don't, and we don't, I can't choose where I want to live. And honestly, I think that defines poverty by not being able to decide where one lives. My hope is to live in a different neighborhood with a yard for my kids to play, but the cost of renting a loose neighborhood outside of select few are not affordable for me to have this freedom of choice. I have had the opportunity to live in a different neighborhood, but it was not feasible due to transportation and the cost of rent. Even though I've made decisions in the past that impact me today, it doesn't mean they should continue to harm me and my family. My passion is the community, like I previously stated, but my giving back to the community is not for a handout. It's to provide hope and give examples that sometimes mishaps and trial and error is just preparation for the future. I wasn't born into wealth, and that was not a choice I made. My kids haven't been born into wealth, and they shouldn't have to suffer due to a choice they did not make either. So my question is, will you support the city in identifying and securing affordable housing development sites outside traditionally low-income neighborhoods, such as Central Hillside and Lincoln Park? And this will allow people of all income levels to live in neighborhoods of their choice. The truth of the matter is, zip codes should not have such a large influence on health and crime rates, but reality in the numbers shows it. And I just hope we have your support in making this equitable decision.
Well, she did a great job. Up next, first will be candidate Kennedy.